the big things that they say are that plants are bad for you, right? So they talk about these pre-caveman societies. Like they go back to claiming like Neanderthal times, right? That everybody ate meat to survive. And they're like, well, we don't see any remnants of plants in fossils or whatever. And I'm like, I mean, in my own head, like that doesn't necessarily add up. Like, why would you have a plant fossilized?
Welcome to Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck, talking wellness and weight loss for real life. We're here to clear up the myths, misinformation, bad science, and marketing to teach you how to eat and how to cheat. Are you ready? I'm having salad with a side of fries.
Hey there, welcome back to another episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck. Today is going to be super fun. So Darlene is back. And joining us also is her husband, John.
Hi, guys. I like the hi, guys thing. Hi, guys.
Right. John, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Darlene's been here, you know. She's a longtime friend of the pod, as they say.
She's all relaxed here and everything, you know, so it's my first visit here. Maybe my last, but definitely my first.
Do you feel uncomfortable?
No.
Okay, good.
Not yet.
Right.
Not him.
Yeah, no, I don't think you could be uncomfortable.
We'll see.
All right. So today's episode is actually inspired by the two of you in combination with a bunch of people asking me about the carnivore diet. And I just wanted to dig into, so carnivore versus herbivore, right? And I guess like in today's terms, it's like the carnivore diet versus plant-based, right? Or as some say, a meatitarian versus plant-based. All right. Are you excited?
More than ever.
I am.
All right, good. Before we get too deep, I want to tell our members what they're getting this week. So members, your recipe is for salad with chicken and crispy farro. Sounds good, right?
Yeah.
It does.
I saw that face. All right. So maybe you've heard me say it before, but we want to think about grains more like a condiment rather than a food group. This recipe is like the perfect example of what that looks like. And it also shows you how to make farro, which we talked about with Tina McDermott. So super easy way, change up the salad if you're bored. This recipe is for you. And not only do you get this recipe as a member, right? You also get weekly recipes like this, a monthly article or tool, extra discounts from me and our partners, plus access to live Q&A sessions. It's a total deal at just $10 a month, right? For all these goodies. The way you join us is by going to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries. As I always say, show yourself that your health is a priority with this membership. Your membership also supports this podcast and this community because I want to keep doing this. So become a member and help us. All right, one more time. You go to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries, or just click the link in the show notes. Once you're there, you enter your email and payment method, click subscribe, and you're all set. You'll get this week's recipe for the salad with chicken and crispy farro. So, all right, what's interesting to me as we talk about, plant-based versus carnivore, you are a couple. You live in the same house together and have very different habits. Like, okay, so for each of you, what's your typical?
Well, I start my day with a protein shake. Sometimes oatmeal. Then Darlene got me off of oatmeal for a little while. So
You're welcome.
I'm all over the place. I don't know if I'm thanking anyone for that because that would fill me up in the morning. But I'll take spinach. Darlene was on a real celery kick for a long time, so everything was celery in the morning. So I don't see her doing celery anymore, but I incorporate the celery into my...
Well, I do, but just not
the juices. We're not doing the juices. We were having juices and everything. So I put celery, I put spinach, I'll put the protein powder in, I'll put almond butter in, and almond milk, right? And that's basically my breakfast. And then anything goes from there.
But you're really plant-based.
I'm mostly plant-based, but I will a lot of fish though too. I don't just eat.
Pescatarian, if you will.
Pescatarian. And the reason I went on the plant-based diet, or mostly plant-based, was I had a health scare a little while ago. You know, when you hit 50 years old, you find out about something called the PSA, and my numbers were really high. You know, high enough to be a concern. So I called a friend of mine who was a registered dietitian, and I said, what do I do here? And she said, basically, get off of all meats, go, try a plant-based diet for a while. And I did that. And the next time I took my PSA test, they did go down. They're still high, but they were down. So that really got me on this more plant-based diet. Not that I was a huge meat eater, but it really got me, away from that. And I was going on all the, different plant-based, products that were out there.
Yeah. Dar, you're a meat eater.
I am. So I start my day off with eggs with veggies in it, a ton of veggies. Yes, I was trying to do that just plant-based diet. And I don't know, I didn't feel great on it. Not that I felt bad, but when I had meat, it was significantly different the next day for me. I felt so good. I felt lean. I felt strong, as opposed to just doing all plant. So I ended up going back to making sure I have, meat protein in my diet every day. So I have something every day. Now, I still have a lot of veggies, but not like I was and not like John does. So yeah, that's the difference, in how we feel.
Yeah, I would say I describe myself as a varietarian, right? I did a nutrition nugget on this not too long ago, but all the things at various times, change it up, eating the rainbow, and then having a combination of plant and animal protein and hitting all those nutrients. But, so first of all, apparently January is World Meat Eaters Month or Carnivore Month or something like that. And then I feel like, John, that was when you heard this podcast. And I'm going to preface this by saying I want to try to not quite name names because I don't want to necessarily drive everybody to their content because I don't want to reinforce what we're kind of talking about. We're sort of the clickbaitiness of it all. But tell everybody what you heard, John, and you were like, maybe I should try meat again.
Well, the thing that I really took away from that podcast was there were a couple of dietitians talking about this. And, one of the things they really focused on was the plant-based meats, the fake meats. And, you think you're going to eat those and they're going to be very healthy, but they're really, really not. So I was eating a lot of, can I mention names of, Beyond Burgers, Beyond Sausage. And I really didn't like the taste of them, but you acquire a taste for them after you have them for a while because you can put, onions, everything on. And I just love the idea of eating a hamburger, a plant-based hamburger. So once I listened to this podcast, I'm like, wow, this stuff is not healthy whatsoever. And as a matter of fact, they're actually saying they're not that they're not healthy, they're unhealthy, quite possibly. So it got me to think. I started to introduce, a little bit. I'd eat meat every now and then. If my kids were having a burger, I'd take a bite of their burger. I'd take a bite of Darlene's burger. So I wasn't never eating it. But that's kind of what got me to say, I got to think about this. It's still eating a lot of fish. And I was thinking about if I was going to introduce meat back into my diet, what kind of meats would I introduce back in my diet? And then I went on a meat eating that week. And it just so happens that week I got sick, but it could have been, it could have been the flu, it could have been COVID, it could have been whatever. But of course, in my head, I tied the two together and I'm like, all right, no more meat again, So I'm trying to find a kind of a balance here on this.
I have to say, though, it was 2 weeks that he was feeling flu-like symptoms. So I really felt my opinion, of course, is that it had something to do with this change in diet because it's the only thing that changed. And it lasted about 2 weeks. And then he started not having meat again. And
rather than just introducing it slowly, I had meat every day, I think, So it was
well, go big or go home. No,
going from no meat to having, meat every day, every other day in some ways. Trying new meat, bison, trying all sorts of bison chili. I made bison hamburgers, whatever.
All right. So I love this so much. And we're going to talk about.
We were thinking about raising bison in the backyard and alpacas.
Perfect. Like we said, go big or go home, right? You want to make sure it's good meat. Grow the cow, right? Raise the cow? You raise a cow. You don't grow a cow. Yeah. So remind me too, when we talk about the plant-based stuff, to talk about the plant-based meats in air quotes. But let's first talk about the carnivore diet. It's sort of what it's about, what they're saying, and the claims that they're making, right? So the first book came out in 2018. It was called The Carnivore Diet. And full disclosure, it was written by a guy who was an orthopedic surgeon who had his license revoked in 2017. His license was revoked for two reasons. One was he didn't keep sufficient medical records for patients. And the second was he had a malpractice suit and he didn't respond to the complaints with sufficient evidence or in sufficient time or whatever it was. And so he had his license revoked. So that was 2017. 2018, he publishes this book. And then he's sort of talking about it. And there's a couple people who are like really big in this philosophy. And you see these people all over, right? Instagram and a bunch of podcasts and all this kind of stuff. Essentially what they say is eat only animals that walk, swim, or fly, and byproducts of that. So milk, yogurt, cheese are fine. A lot of them lean toward raw. So raw meat and raw cheeses, raw, like not pasteurized kinds of things. I've heard people who talk about it, they're like, there's no way a vegan could be as strong as we are. But I also think, there's a difference between somebody who's doing like a strongman competition, who's like lifting rocks or turning over tractors, and someone, which is a very different kind of strength, than someone else. I think there is sufficient evidence around low carb, high protein nutrition about supporting endocrine function. Right? Our hormones is our endocrine system. So leptin, ghrelin, those hormones that tell us when we're hungry, when we're satisfied, cortisol, the stress hormone, like all of our hormones are part of the endocrine system. And there is science there. But funny enough, that is not any of the science they tout when they talk about the carnivore diet. And I mean, frankly, there is very little research on carnivore diet. And by little, I mean like zero, and certainly nothing long-term. The claims that people make is typically around improved autoimmune conditions. When you eat high protein, high fat, which is what this is essentially, right? You are eating less, right? Because those foods are very satisfying. And so we do see eating less to improve autoimmune conditions. So is it causal versus correlated? Who knows? They actually haven't researched it at all. The big things that they say are that plants are bad for you, right? So they talk about these caveman, pre-caveman societies. Like they go back to claiming like Neanderthal times, right? That everybody ate meat to survive. And they're like, well, we don't see any remnants of plants in fossils or whatever. And I'm like, I mean, in my own head, like that doesn't necessarily add up. Like, why would you have a plant fossilized? It turns into the next thing because they're theoretically biodegradable in a way that things that turn into fossils aren't. So like, I don't know. I also think that's going back so far to call that human. Like, were Neanderthals humans? No, I feel like they were the precursor to humans.
And they didn't make it. There's no more of them around, or cavemen either. So I guess that's
right. Right. I think there's also something to be said for like throughout that history, like adapting to agriculture.
Right.
Right. They also claim that meat is cleaner or a more pure way to eat. But then it's really funny because you'll hear some of these people say, oh, but we do drink coffee. Or one of them was like, she goes, I'll have bourbon. And I'm like, wait, but like coffee is plant-based. And
bourbon is plant-based. Vodka is plant-based.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm having a problem with the logic behind it. Right.
So what's the difference between, I don't know these terms, I kind of put them together, carnivore, paleo, keto, all of that. Are they pretty similar?
Great question. They are. They're sort of all on like one end of the spectrum. So I would say paleo is closer to the middle of the spectrum of things than keto, and keto is closer to the middle than carnivore.
Okay. Essentially,
carnivore is all meat and fat. Some of them will talk about having some fruits.
So kind of like the old Atkins diet then, I guess?
I think keto is more of the old Atkins.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So like if you're going from keto, it's a relatively simple transition to carnivore from keto. Paleo is sort of in that vein, but paleo feels much more reasonable to me than this. in a lot of ways. I mean, paleo is about saying, all right, let's remove the processed foods. Let's not eat grains that we've invented, now. Let's not eat what we would call new to nature molecules, and focus on plants and protein and clean protein at that. I mean, the same way you were talking about before with, the plant-based proteins, I think you end up with the same thing here of like, what does your carnivore look like? Right? Because listen, this turns into something very expensive. I mean, if you look at your grocery bill, what's the most expensive thing on there?
Those meat-like things.
Yeah, not the kale,
Yeah.
not the chickpeas, And it's interesting because I think in listening to these interviews with some of these people who tout this philosophy, it's like I end up having the same love-hate as I have with Dr. Oz because I think they give people enough information to be dangerous and not necessarily enough information to really execute healthfully.
And there's always agendas. One of the things I think about with the carnivore diet is that not all meats are created equal, right? One of the first things I watched on Netflix years ago was Forks Over Knives, which was it was an interesting documentary. And one of the things they showed was the factory-based, the meat industry. That makes you
pink slime.
That to me seems like the Beyond Burger is like the plant-based version of the of the pink slime in the meat world. So that really made me kind of want to figure out about, clean meats, if there's such a thing. And I guess there is. And, if we buy meat, it's from Whole Foods. We try to buy something that seems a little healthier, but I don't even know that either,
Right. And I want to come back to that because, sort of later, I want to talk about sort of how do we evaluate the things that we're hearing from these people? Because it's exactly what you're talking about. It's sort of like, I hate to use the word clickbait, but it's like, what's their motive? But it is the same thing. And then there's other people talking about the carnivore diet who are saying, if you choose always grass-fed, if you choose leaner cuts of meat, you're not getting enough of the fat that you need to continue to feel satisfied. So they're recommending like the fattier cuts of meat. It's just very interesting. And there is sort of surface level merit to some of the claims that they make. So I want to talk about two of these in particular. And this is sort of an exercise that I do all the time. Like when I hear about these things that I sort of on the surface don't necessarily agree with, part of my approach is to say, okay, based on what I know, how could this be true? Right? Like, what do they know that I don't know? Or how do I try to make this make sense if I try to apply the logic to what they're saying? So one of the things they say is that they talk about like anti-nutrients or things they say, plants are bad for us.
Someone says plants are bad for us?
Yes. That's part of the philosophy. Yeah, well, that's part of the philosophy behind the carnivore diet. They say not only do we not need them, they're bad for us.
Which sounds ridiculous, right?
Right. So again, it's like they took one piece of something that is true, or maybe two things of things, a couple things that are true, and then blow it up. Right. So one example of this would be like lectins. Okay. So lectins are a type of protein. Almost every food has lectins, but especially in like grains and legumes. Okay. And some people say that, lectins increase gut permeability and drive autoimmune disease. Now, remember, they were saying too, some of the benefits of the carnivore diet was supporting healing from autoimmune conditions. So if we remove lectins, right, do we support the autoimmune? So lectins are essentially this type of protein that may not respond well in everyone's body. Now, what also happens is that when we cook foods sometimes, we remove those lectins and they no longer become an issue. So how often are you eating raw beans and lentils? Like probably not, but okay. But so that's where you might say, oh, let me eliminate these handful of vegetables or beans or the grains that are higher in lectins and see how I feel, right? Rather than saying, oh, these things have lectins, let's remove everything, right? Or then even for the average person, arbitrarily saying, let me remove everything, even though I don't necessarily have a challenge with this thing.
Plus, I would assume the body, some people's bodies don't process raw anything very well, right? Part of cooking things makes them more digestible, I would imagine.
Right. But it's interesting because if you go to this Neanderthal philosophy, I don't know, were Neanderthals cooking?
They didn't have fire, I don't believe. So fire.
Right. So I think they predate fire.
Mm-hmm.
So, right. I don't know. Another example of this is oxalates. So oxalates are found in plants and they can also be, synthesized in the body or created in the body. But oxalates bind to minerals and have been linked to like kidney stones and some other kinds of things. So, again, if you have a challenge with calcium oxalate crystals in the body, then maybe I would look at saying, okay, let me focus on these low oxalate foods rather than saying, let me eliminate all vegetables so that I don't have to deal with oxalates. But there are such things as sort of these anti-nutrients that impair our ability to absorb other nutrients or can potentially not sit well with us. So that's sort of the philosophy on the carnivore thing. I mean, there's certainly more, right? There's books on it, but I think that gives us what we need to sort of understand it. Yes? What questions on carnivore?
No, I never heard that it's I never heard the anti-vegetable piece. I just heard that if you're gonna be carnivore, you're gonna mostly eat meat and maybe some fruits, but mostly meat. And I know there's some people with serious autoimmune that it actually did help them for whatever reason. But they're already struggling with other issues going on in their lives, so maybe that does work for them. But the idea that it would work for everyone, I don't know if you have to go that extreme.
Yeah,
and we do a lean. Well, me and the kids. We do lean meat. So when you're talking about the full fat and we are doing lean, but we're also eating more throughout the day. You know what I mean?
Right.
So we are satisfied later on.
Right. You're also getting fat from other sources.
Right.
I can say that because I know you.
Right.
But there was one guy who says flat out, I drink water, I have salt and meat. That is it.
Sounds just sounds boring.
It does sound boring. I was thinking that too. It's boring.
No pizza.
Right. So if we go to the plant-based side, I always say, I did this as an episode in the very beginning of the podcast of what does your vegan look like, right? You could be an Oreo and French fry vegan.
Right.
I mean, they are both vegan, but
with a martini, obviously, right? I mean, if you're
right. Maybe go tequila because it comes from agave, right? A little lower glycemic. But I mean, the whole thing is we can sort of define it how we want to define it. And to your point before, John, with some of these plant-based meats of what does your vegan look like? I mean, if what you're choosing are Oreos, French fries, and Beyond Meat, I would say your health outcomes will not be better than somebody who eats, grass-fed beef.
Another thing I want to add, besides my PSA issue, I had my cholesterol numbers, were up, and I was so excited to go to my my last doctor's appointment to get my blood work done because I'm like, I've been eating, I've been basically vegetarian, modified vegan for about 6 months or a year at that point, and I went back in and my numbers were higher. So that made me like, what the, really wonder what's going on here, and as a result, I went on a statin just because he said, look, this is just, I said, what's the side effects of a statin? He goes, lower chance of stroke and heart attack. I said, well, that's a good side effect. So, let me try that. Let me modify my diet a little bit along the way. But so I have that I was playing with too. I thought I was going to go in and he was going to go, what did you do? Your cholesterol is like non-existent. And that didn't happen that way. So I was really shocked because I was pretty, I wasn't militant about it, but I was pretty good in what I was eating.
The whole thing about animal fat or fat in general causing cholesterol came from one study that no one's been able to replicate ever and was really a misnomer that sort of got blown so out of proportion. And, now everybody's afraid to eat fat. And, we're really doing ourselves a disservice, but we should have another conversation about your statin.
Gladly.
I had a feeling that was coming.
I'll just say CoQ10.
Well, you have to take that if you take a statin because it depletes your CoQ10. So
there you go.
Who knows if the CoQ10 is making your cholesterol go down or whether it's a statin or not.
Yeah. So anyway, with the plant-based thing, so there's research, and listen, the plant-based thing, you don't have to be full-blown vegan either, right? There's a spectrum here too. You'll hear people talk about studies on vegetarians having lower mortality rates. You'll hear autoimmune stories for, vegans also, and, reduced inflammation, reduced joint pain, things like that. But it's actually really interesting. So when you dig into it, because part of the challenge with all of these is there are sort of confounding factors, right? So there was something else I was reading where they were basically saying, so like this mortality rate thing, if you look at the studies and then say, okay, if we look at people who don't smoke, eat some meat, don't drink in excess, lead active lives, right? Their mortality rates were about the same as the vegetarians. So the question is, right, like which piece of it is actually creating that lower mortality rate, or what are you attributing that to? You'll hear people talk about the cholesterol thing, like we just said, lower caloric intake, increased fiber intake, improved blood sugar and insulin response. And I think it was Forks Over Knives where they talked about what was it, the clarity or the viscosity of your blood was different, right? I mean, the interesting thing is that both with the carnivore diet and with, vegan or vegetarian, we see significant calorie intake drops in both groups. So, I mean, where does it, right? Like how many of these outcomes are a function of this change in nutrition in general, right? Forcing the body to do some work and shifting how it functions. And especially when we look at autoimmune things, autoimmune support, I guess, I'm trying to think about how to legally say it, right? But support for autoimmune conditions, we see connected to lower caloric intake. And, so again, is it causation or correlation? Who knows? But those are sort of the schools of thought on both of them.
One of the things that came up about, if you really switch to one of these, let's say the carnivore diet, you're cutting out so many other things to eat, and you can only eat so much meat. Even these people love meat. So they were cutting down on their caloric intake because they were really focused in this narrow channel. And I think even with that Atkins diet, which was really, bacon, cheese, omelets, yolks, the whole thing, by the time, you cut out all the other fun stuff, right? You're really just focused on that. And of course, I tried that about 20 years ago, and it did work. It does work. But you really run out of things to eat after a while, so you are cutting down on your diet, your caloric intake quite a bit.
It works when you lost weight.
Well, right. I mean,
for the short term,
like people go on it, they go on it to lose weight. So you do lose it because you're cutting a lot of calories out of your diet. And I think, there you're going into ketosis, right, which is another fat burner, I guess. And then, but then when they come off of it again, like most of us, people put all the weight back on and then more.
Right. Well, and ketosis is basically, it's your body, a state of when your body is burning ketones, right? Your body is burning fat as fuel, which also shifts moment to moment and allows for zero flexibility.
Right.
And by the way, carnivore diet does too. It is a very black and white, this is it or it's not, approach. And I think you're exactly right. It's very restrictive. There isn't a off day, right? If you're committing to this lifestyle, you're really committing.
Yeah.
And for Darlene and I, we're not looking to go on a diet.
Yeah.
We're looking to really just
a lifestyle.
Yeah, lifestyle. Eat foods that make us feel good and healthy. And I found a balance between a lot of vegetables, fish,
exactly,
maybe some meat being a really a nice complement to each other, rather than just going into one lane, which is, to me, it's hard enough to cook and be interesting if you have everything at your you can choose from everything. When you're just focusing on just vegetables or just fish, it's tough to enjoy food.
Yeah.
For a month you can, because we did that too. We were cooking every night and trying different things, and and then after a month you're like, all right, what are we going to do again here now? So it makes it hard.
What's new?
Yeah. So, and that's actually sort of the perfect bridge into what I want to talk about next, which is sort of the reasoning behind choosing whatever plan we're choosing, some red flags to look for when we hear these kinds of things and whatever. Let's do a quick break for a message from our partner for this episode, Lumiere de Vie Skincare. So Lumiere de Vie Skincare was founded by Amber Ridinger McLaughlin in response to her own experience of mere marginal results from countless costly creams. She realized the revitalization of her youthful skin could only occur if she developed products herself. Working closely with beauty scientists and exploring the most advanced ingredients derived from the earth and sea, Amber created Lumiere de Vie, the next generation of skincare. The extensive line of luxury skincare products is designed to address all skin types and concerns with the highest quality natural ingredients and powerful formulas that help heal, soothe, moisturize, and protect. Lumiere de Vie acts as first aid for your skin. The result? Rejuvenated, luminous, beautiful-looking skin. So in honor of John being here, let's talk about the men's line. So LDV is for everyone. So the men's line has, a cleansing gel, a face scrub, a firming eye serum. Right? That's just the beginning. They have all the things. John, you might want to look at the eye serum. I'm not saying you in particular.
That came out wrong. Off right now.
Right? So everything in the men's line seems to range from like $25 to $35. You could also do the men's skincare value kit as a cleanser, toner, moisturizer for $75. So the men's toner comes in like a tub of these like pre-soaked pads. I am obsessed with them. Those days when you feel like
I've been using them for a year. You don't see the difference?
Right.
How dare you?
So those days when you just don't feel like washing your face? I use the men's toner pads, and then I'll finish with like the rest of my normal skincare. So ladies, you can use this too. So that's the Lumiere de Vie Homme line. Of course, because you're a Salad with a Side of Fries listener, you get 10% off plus free shipping. Simply text the word SKIN, SKIN, to 844-947-4846. You'll receive the link and coupon code right to your phone. Again, simply text the word SKIN to 844-947-4846 to try Lumiere de Vie Skincare and get 10% off. This is a toll-free number. Standard text and data rates may apply. All right. So John, you were just saying before that it sort of comes down to like, what are you looking for? Like, why would we opt for something so extreme? Like both vegan and carnivore or vegetarian and carnivore are incredibly restrictive. Like, the two ends of the spectrums have much more in common than we realize, I think. Like Darlene, you were even saying before, like you feel better when you have a combination of foods. I do too.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel so much better. Like it's such a significant difference for me as opposed to just doing plant and then combining the two. It's just so much better for me.
Yeah, like I notice I have more energy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a better mood.
Me too. And I have to say, I cut out grain because I do have autoimmune. So I feel like the meat, it fills me up more. Mm-hmm. So it kind of takes the place of the grain for me.
That's an interesting thing too, because again, going back to what does your vegan or vegetarian look like? If you're relying a lot on these grains, that's not necessarily your most healthful option either. We have a episode coming up I think it's going to come out in July, about understanding some of these modern grains versus ancient grains. But it's real. Putting grains from food group back to, side condiment kind of a thing, has tremendous value, and, filling in with the vegetables and the protein.
Absolutely. Yeah. It makes a difference.
She told me one day after one of your discussions, you think grain, 7 grain. I'm going to get 7 grain, because I think that's going to be great. And then she told me that that's really not that good.
Right.
So I'm getting fooled left and right by this stuff.
Right.
You can have the sprouted grain.
Sprouted grains are good. Mm-hmm. But you got to read the labels, right? The whole thing also, I think, again, going back to why are we choosing this? If you're generally well and you want to feel good and have energy and go about your life and live the things, I vote for varietarian. If you have a specific disease state or condition that you are looking to, intervene nutritionally, then it makes the argument for maybe saying, I have a greater commitment to these choices. I'm willing to do something that's maybe a little more extreme. And then looking at how do we choose those things.
Right.
Yeah.
But for every day, if you're healthy, you don't have a lot of weight to lose, and you're just trying to have energy and not feel bloated. That was another thing. Getting bloated was always an issue. So we've been trying to find, one of the things we've been looking into is better flour. Some of was that 00 flour? That's been a real difference. You can eat the pot, and some new pastas we've been trying, because we do love pasta.
Yeah.
But there's some pastas that we have, and I feel horrible, just horrible after I eat them. My stomach will go out. And then we found this other pasta that's great, and you can eat it, and it's satiating, tastes good. It's got to get good texture to it. So there's some really good options out there, I guess, until I find out those aren't healthy for you either.
No, well, those are, I think Darlene and I talked about this the other day, where it's like the flour from Italy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they grow their grains very differently than we do. And so it doesn't have a lot of the same issues that our grains do.
Right. So with that said, my body can handle like that 00 flour. So the next day, I have nothing going on. There's nothing negative going on for me. So it is very interesting.
And I think this really makes the argument for saying, pay attention to how you feel. And if you're not sure, make that the primary focus to figure it out and start to pay attention to your body to say, oh, this is when I feel better.
Right.
And even John, as you were saying before, like, oh, we make these choices to lose weight. Well, are we looking to lose weight in the short term or to keep it off long term and promote our health?
Well, I'm glad
those are different choices.
Because what I wanted to say is that there's a difference between, are we eating what we're eating to lose weight, or are we eating what we're eating to be healthy? Because I feel like a lot of people mix those two lines, right? So, right, is your goal to lose weight only, or is your goal to be healthy? Because there is a difference.
And you can do both.
Correct, right. Right. But
one is not inherently both.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, we have a pretty active lifestyle. I try to run several days a week. I do some weights. Darlene's always working out, and just make sure we have the energy for that. But I do know, after 50, I could just eat whatever I wanted to and work out, and that was fine. But now I have to really watch what I eat as well as work out just to maintain where I want to be. And I have a 5-pound fluctuation, over a 2-week period, which is, parts.
Yeah, well, you're human.
Yeah, it could be a lot of different things.
Yeah. So let's talk about, when we hear these things that seem so interesting or appealing, or, how do we sort of evaluate it, right? How do we sort of have our little guru-ometer, right? Like, is this person legit, or is this, are they trying to be an influencer, right? So some of the red flags to me are they saying you're only going to hear this from me? No one else is going to tell you this. That's a bit of a red flag to me. You're the only person who knows this thing. You're the only person who sees this research, or there isn't research, right? Like, why is it, if something is really well researched and found to work for a vast majority of people, you wouldn't be the only one who knows about it. And frankly, you're not hearing anything on this podcast ever that you can't hear or verify somewhere else. Maybe you haven't heard it elsewhere, but it's available.
Yeah, one of the things in that one podcast I listened to, and I really forget who the two people were on it, but they weren't pushing a diet. They were just pushing the idea that meat is not bad and plant-based is not good, right? It was talking more about the research that, they found on the plant-based diet, and also some of the research they found on not the carnivore diet, but just eating meat, and why meat, can and should have a place in your diet if you like meat.
Yeah.
That don't just say, I'm not ever eating meat because of, whatever, but that there really can be some healthy options for meat, and there can be some very unhealthy options for the plant-based stuff. And now that more of the plant-based diets are coming into, being bought up by some of the big food companies, right? They're, the nutrition value, they look slick and they look great, but they're really, there's not a lot of great research on them. And
being a savvy consumer to look at a label and say, oh, I see what's actually in here. The only thing plant-based about it is that it's not an animal.
Right.
There actually aren't plants here.
I couldn't describe, some of the things on the ingredient list for Beyond Burgers. I don't even know what half of it was.
Yeah.
Right. There was just a lot of, long chemical names on there, and
exactly.
You feel good. And then when you cook them up, there's a lot of oil that comes out of them. And
where did this come from?
What is that oil? What kind of oil is that? Then you read that and you're like, oh, that's not really the good kind of, so
Yeah.
like to figure out how to make my own plant-based burgers that maybe are made out of vegetables would be good if I want. Yeah, if I want to do that.
And that's the thing, right? Like thinking about when we hear this stuff, right, on either side, think, okay, how does this make sense with what I know? Like what I know about biology, what I know about nutrition, and what I know about my own body. Because I always go back to this, like we start to follow rules, we ignore what we know about ourselves. And that's how we stop being able to know what our body's even feeling, because we're paying attention to rules instead of, what's actually happening in our body. And there's a lot of these people out there who are really after sort of the audience. There's this idea of like audience capture. So it becomes this self-fulfilling cycle of the content created. It's reinforced because people are listening to it. So therefore it's creating more of that content. So how much of this is that, right? Those things tend to be inflexible or intractable positions. So they take a stance. There is nothing they're going to hear or say that is going to move them from this stance.
And any research they tend to read, feeds into their confirmation bias, right?
Totally. Well, it's not even research. That's the other thing, is that it's 99.99% anecdotal stories.
Right.
We are humans who are emotional beings, and we respond to the anecdotal stories. And so we often hear these stories and think it's research, but it's actually not. It's someone's experience. And we can hear those same things on almost any side of an argument, really.
Sure.
Because then you end up into also like nocebo and placebo play into it, right? Nocebo, we're expecting a negative outcome. Placebo, we're expecting a positive outcome. So those are going to play into it too, no matter what we try. Another red flag with, the anecdotal stories, the intractable, inflexible position is also that there's no way to test the credibility. There's no way to verify that what they're saying is correct or not. And a lot of times, a lot of the influencers and some of these like Instagram doctors, they're touting like this unconfirmable information. And there was actually something I was listening to recently about vitamin D, and I'm like in this rabbit hole with it. But I'm also saying like, where's the research to show that you're right? Like you're saying everybody else is wrong, but where's also the piece verifying what you're saying? So we want to look for sort of all sides of it, right? Like, are they accounting for these confounding factors? Are they cherry picking data if they're talking about the research, And then those are some of the red flags that I sort of think of when hearing about these things or when I see people doing it, because I think we can all have these skills. Like this is not a unique thing that only I can do. Like we all can do this for ourselves.
But one of the problems is that it's only so much time one has in their life, right? To kind of dig in that. So you do kind of want to listen to people that sound like they're authority on something, and you have to discriminate a little bit about what you're hearing. But there's only so much time to sit down and dig into what's going on. So I depend on, Darlene to tell me a little bit of what she's learned, because she's always talking about and studying this stuff, and then going by what my body says to me, at that point, or what my blood work says to me from what I thought I was doing the right thing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So a couple things, right? As I think about this, if we were to say, okay, I'm going to try this thing, and sort of like critically assessing, right? If we were to go only animal, right? Well, the animals eat plants. So how does that work? And are we able to get the nutrients of the plants if we're only eating the animals? So I was like, well, where are nutrients stored in the body, right? Because when we eat meat, we're typically eating muscle, but nutrients aren't really stored in the muscle, right? Nutrients are stored more in organs, like the liver is a big storage house, if you will, right? Warehouse. That's a storage house.
The all liver diet next. Maybe the all liver.
Right. Right. Well, so there is one of these guys on Instagram who's the carnivore guy who talks about eating organ meats, right? But like, who's picking that? Like, they taste gross. And then what do you do about water soluble vitamins, right? Because those you just pee out. So like your B vitamins and vitamin C, like those aren't stored in the body. So sometimes the more restrictive the nutrition, and either way, the greater the commitment, not only to that plant, but the greater the commitment to potentially supplementation, or how are you going to still get your body everything else that it needs? And then I sort of, in thinking about this too, I was like, okay, dinosaurs. Like, as long as we're not even going to talk humans, right? Dinosaurs. There were herbivores, there were carnivores, and there were omnivores. Why is it so different that humans would be that way too?
And they were huge and strong.
Huge, right? So, then also thinking about like human biology, John, like you hadn't had meat for a long time, had it again, it didn't really agree with you because we lose these digestive enzymes if we don't eat these foods. But that means that we all, as humans from infancy, have digestive enzymes for both plants and meat. So doesn't that biologically make us then designed to be omnivores in some way? I mean, I'm more asking questions. Like, I'm not saying this is fact. I'm not saying this is what,
You're not being a guru right now, right?
I hope not, right? But it's like, this is my thought process, right? And trying to say, sure, some people have allergies where they can't eat certain things or certain things don't agree with them. Fine. That's where we get into sort of the adjustment for the individual and recognizing what we feel. But to subscribe to something as one way being right for everyone, or saying that this is what humans were supposed to be on any end, anywhere on the spectrum, like, I don't know. If I think about it, I think humans were supposed to be a combination, and not everybody has to be the same.
I agree with that.
So what do we say? What should we be eating now? Now I'm totally confused. No, I really, no, I like the conversation because it is moving me back towards what I really think. It's about trying a little bit of everything, but really, I think the quality. I think that's what we spend a lot of money on food. We spend a lot of money on food at the grocery store. It's more about trying to find, good quality stuff like the 00 flour. I think that's been a real game changer for us because we do like making pizzas at home and things like that, and the right kinds of meat. Then we get into the whole organic, whatever organic means, right? And we know it's more expensive, and it says they're in a cage and cage free or whatever, grass fed. That sounds good. What does that really mean? Is that really much healthier? It sounds better than the forks over knives, factories that they showed us. But so there's some things I want to feel better about if I eat chicken. I think I want to have the, rather than buying one of the big factory chickens. I think I feel better eating Whole Foods, something from Whole Foods that says they talk nicely to the chickens before they kill them.
Right. I mean, yeah, affirmations go a long way.
Right.
No, but it brings up a really good point, which is, the practicality piece of it. Okay, this guy I'm watching on Instagram who's eating raw liver and raw meat all day and feeding it to his dog and only eating a couple fruits with it, like, that is not reasonable for me in my life. So, like, the other side of this too is to think about, like, what can you reasonably do consistently? Like, what is your level of commitment to these choices and whatever lifestyle you're choosing, and making sure that sort of we're considering all these other factors. Like, I think the drama of it all can be intriguing, and then we need to take it back. On the plant front, I've said this before, there is zero evidence that a plant-based diet is best for 100% of people, but there is evidence that 100% of people would benefit from more plants in their diet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of how we live. We've tried. I know Darlene did a 30 vegetables in 30 days or 30. We were trying different vegetables every night, and it was actually kind of fun, but it's a lot of work.
Yeah,
it is, but it was fun.
And they're not all hits either. But
that's okay. We tried it.
Right.
Awesome. Any other final thoughts on the plant versus carnivore?
No, I mean, I think you nailed it. Like, at least in my opinion, for me, I need a little bit of everything, Me too. And I'm going by how I feel, because I feel great if I have a little bit of everything. So, that phrase, everything in moderation, that's for me. Outside of grain, that's for me. Everything else.
What do you feel about, though, if you're going to get meat? If you're going to, choose to have some meat or fish or where do you like to shop and how do you go to pick the right kinds of meats for you if you're going to introduce that into your system?
I like to go to some of the butchers who could say, oh, well, this is where this came from. Mm-hmm. Even the farmer's market, because I can talk to them.
Right.
And I'm going to look for grass-fed beef. I personally like the taste of the leaner cuts. I don't know if that's just because that's what I grew up eating, but I prefer those. And then, or a burger, but I get delivery sometimes from this butcher in one of the markets. And it's, even there, they'll make their own sort of sausages of things that aren't even necessarily, I don't know necessarily what's in them, but at least they make them and they could say what is in it, right? That's my big thing is like.
Not going to be overly processed. Yeah, you're going to.
Exactly. Yeah. And like high quality. Then the other side of it is a lot of times when I end up eating those things, I'm out at a restaurant and therein lies a different choice where when somebody else was buying it and preparing it, we get what they make.
Right.
And those are also choices.
But even that, we go out to dinner a lot, and we send the bread back. We don't eat the bread, and then if we do have a dessert at the end of the night, we split one.
Yeah,
and we'll just take a few bites. I take really big bites, but 3 bites.
Right, because you guys learned the 3-bite rule.
3-bite. It's a great rule, and you feel satiated. You don't feel like you're cheating yourself. And the truth is, you don't need 4, 5, 6 bites. It's kind of good. You end the night that way and go home.
Yeah, well, that's what I call balance.
Right. I mean, you don't want to go out to a restaurant and then feeling guilty the whole time because you don't know what to choose. You're going out to go have fun. So
enjoy.
Make the best choice with what you're presented with, right? And
exactly.
And don't stress.
Then you won't judge those people sitting at the other tables who are eating one dessert. But each person at the table has their own dessert and they're eating the whole thing. I'm like, oh my goodness.
All right. We could talk for forever. Let's do our nutrition nugget. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
Okay.
All right. This week, we're talking about working the globe. So Darlene's cheering, laughing. So we were together when we learned this one. This one comes from Brandy, who's actually been here a couple times too. So anyway, the idea here is if you're eating the same foods all the time, you can get bored. And sometimes that means changing it up, buying something else. Sometimes it also means it's changing how we make the food. So take a food, I'm going to use broccoli as an example, and work the globe. Think about the way different regions of the world might prepare the broccoli. So we could make it Italian, right? Saute it with garlic, oregano, add some marinara sauce and Parmesan cheese, right? Now we have Italian broccoli. You can make it Middle Eastern, so bake it with tahini, hummus, and then you can use za'atar or sumac, which are spices. Make it Asian, steam it with ginger, and then add miso and liquid aminos. Make it Moroccan, so roast it, and then you can do lemon juice, coriander, cumin, garlic, and a little cinnamon to make it Moroccan, right? And Google can be your best friend here. So think about any part of the world and Google how they make broccoli or whatever the food is that you have in your fridge, right? Maybe you don't have broccoli, but you're sick of eating, I don't know. Darlene, give me one.
Cauliflower.
Same thing, right? Google how different parts of the world make cauliflower.
Right. And we were talking the other day about chicken. You could just change it up with all of those different regions and you feel like you have a brand new meal.
Exactly. So it really turns this boring staple food that you buy every week at the store into something that has brand new life. And that is the magic when you work the globe.
I can't wait to see what Darlene's going to do for dinner this week. I'm looking so forward to this now. Coming in and seeing a new Moroccan cauliflower.
I can't wait either. I'm going to have to come over for dinner. Well, thank you again for being here. I appreciate both of you for joining us.
Thanks for having us. This was great.
Absolutely. So as always, everybody, I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck. Connect with me on Instagram at Jenn Trepeck, JENNTREPECK. Actually, that's all social media. Same handle. Please reach out, share your key takeaways, your ideas, any questions. This is also the easiest way to learn more about working with me and Darlene because we work together.
That's right.
Also, I am personally inviting you to become a member. Go to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries. Becoming a member supports this podcast, this community, and above all, supports your health. You'll get this week's recipe for the salad with chicken and crispy farro. So until next week, remember, it's not all about the drama that we see on the internet and the gurus. It's about checking in with what we know about our biology, nutrition, and ourselves to choose what's best for us.
Well, friends, that's it for today's episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. Congratulations for making yourself and your health a priority. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to click subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform. Share us with a friend, and we'll be back next week. Always remember, you deserve it, and you are worth it. Happy healthy.